welcome to Norman's Orchids again. As you can tell, I'm not Jamie Fang. Jamie is out this week, so I get the pleasure of doing the pre-show for you. And today we're going to talk about lights. My name is Jeff Young, and I'm going to talk to you about why you need lights for the winter time, and actually why it's beneficial just to use them year-round instead of just the winter time. Right now you can tell it's getting darker these days. We don't have anywhere near the amount of sunlight that we had even 2 to 3 weeks ago. Light is getting very short at this point. So you have all these orchids that want to bloom in the spring, and what are you going to do? A lot of people place them by their windowsills, which is great. If you have an east-facing window, you can do that. You may get enough light in to be able to bloom some of your lower light level requirement orchids like Phalaenopsis and different things. But other folks just don't have that pleasure, or they grow them in their basement and they don't get anywhere near enough light. So they have to bring in a lot more light to be able to do it. So I was faced with the same dilemma, probably 3 years ago now, maybe a little bit more, maybe 4 years ago, of where I had a house that I got great east-facing light from, but I didn't get any light from any other windows. And when I moved from that house, my orchids were not blooming. I would get great leaf production, I would get great root production, but I just did not have any orchids blooming. All my bloomers stopped blooming regularly for me. So I began looking at buying lights. I bought several different LEDs off of eBay, off of Amazon, go to Costco, go to Walmart, whatever, and buy LEDs. But the problem that I found was that all the LEDs, it would say, I'd order it off of, say, eBay, and it said, oh, this is 300 watts. And I would plug it in, and I think I'm going to get 300 watts from it. And then I started measuring how much electricity it was actually drawing. It was only drawing 100 watts. I think 119 watts to be exact with it. So here I'm supposed to have this LED that's going to put out 300 watts, but it's only taking in 119 watts, and probably a good portion of that, 10-15 watts, is being used by the fan to cool it. So I said, well, this just doesn't work. So I'd go and try a couple other LEDs. Bought 8-10 different ones off of Amazon and eBay. It's all the same thing. Oh, this is 1200 watts. But you plug it in, you actually measure it, pulls 300, 400 watts. Well, that's not 1200 watts. So then I started looking around, and I seen there was some things you can actually make your own LEDs. I thought, hey, that sounds like fun. I'll try and make some of my own LEDs. So I started buying these little kits and putting together LEDs, and I said, this isn't too bad. But it wasn't exactly what I wanted, because the way that I wanted to grow it was I wanted to do it in the baker's racks, which is the wire metal racks that you can buy off of Costco, or you can walk into Lowe's, different places, and buy. They're great, they're easy to set up, they're multiple tiered shelves, and you can probably hold 30 to 50 plants depending upon the size of the pot that you have that you're putting in there. So I bought those, and then I started thinking, okay, well, how am I going to light this? Because the shelves are only so far apart. If I have that distance, I can't go out and buy a huge LED that puts out a beam, because it's going to fry one section of the shelf and the other part of the shelf isn't going to have any. Or I'm going to spend $200 per shelf to try and put LEDs on it, and that didn't make sense either. So I started thinking, okay, we need something that goes across like a shop light. A shop light that would go across these shelves and hang on these shelves would be ideal. So that's when I started looking. I found housing like this. This is a really nice housing, because this one is only 24 inches, but for 48, we make the longer ones. You put this across your shelf, and you can hang it. It doesn't take up a lot of space, and it's going to cover the entire length of your shelf, right? So if you put 2 of them on there, you're going to get even distance across the entire shelf. I thought, well, that's going to be really good. So then we had to start thinking about spectrum and all kinds of other different things. That leads down to a whole nother road, which we'll get into in a minute. But what I found was, by taking 2 of these and putting it on a shelf, I never use one, always use 2 per shelf, that it'll cover the depth of the shelf, which is usually between 14 and 18 inches. So 2 of these will cover one shelf. I thought, okay, that's great. Now how are we going to wire all these things together? You know, that is another consideration, because I don't want to have 6 or 8 plugs to plug in the LEDs per shelf. So what I come up with, and what is readily available out there, and I'll just plug this one in and show you, is if we plug this into the power on one side, that lights up the LED, right? Now it's on, it's running. So now I can take a second LED, because I have another wire coming off this, and plug in a second LED to it. I just have to connect it there properly, get it stay on. So now I have 2 LEDs running. Well, 2 LEDs will do 1 shelf. Okay, we already talked about that. That's great. How do we get from that shelf to my next shelf on my rack? Well, a simple connector, which we have these, they're 30 inches. We'll connect back onto the end. And then plug in to the next LED. And that takes me to a whole nother shelf. Look at this. This is probably 3 feet or 3.5 feet from this light to the next window. So because each LED, so this would be one level of flowers. This would be your next level. And you can daisy chain 10 or 12 of these together. It really doesn't matter. You know, each one of these is only about 10 watts. So even if you had 10, that's only 100 watts. That's the strength of a regular light bulb. Not a big deal. And you can just keep going multiples all the way on up to get what you need. So that solved my dilemma of how am I going to energize this thing? Because I can take one standard plug it into a 110, 115, and then light up as many on that shelf as I wanted to do. So that gets me all of the different levels. So then the question was, when I'm doing these, well, what is optimum for orchids? How do I figure out what I'm going to do? I knew that I needed light, but all light isn't the same. What do orchids really want over what we see? What people see is really more of the green spectrum of, well, just the spectrum. We see more of the green portion than we do the lower end, which would be the blue, or the higher end, which is red. So the plants, what we have found out, like more of the blue spectrum for root growth. So we need to have blue spectrum in there if we're going to provide good root growth to them. But what about flowering? The flowering and photosynthesis is more driven off of the red spectrum. So we have to have a good amount of red if we're going to have flowering and leaf growth, right? We have to have blue because we want the roots to grow well. We have to have good root system, or you're not going to be able to support your flowering and leaf growth. But you also have to have blue. So we balance that out, and that's why you'll see my LEDs, although they have a lot of red in it, the light that comes off of them is white, because I really can't stand the purple light or the just solid blue or the solid red light. It just doesn't look right in your setup. And you can't enjoy the colors of your flowers if you have purple and red light like that. You have to almost turn your LEDs off if you want to look at your flowers. And to me, that's absurd. Why do you want to turn your LEDs off? You might as well leave them on. So my LEDs will actually enhance the flowers. Let me just grab one. So if you have your flower and you put them under my LEDs, they actually enhance the appearance of it. They don't take away from it. Whereas if you just have a purple or a red LED and you want to look at your flowers, you're going to have to turn off your LEDs to even look at it. To me, that's just crazy. So you can see, which I'm not going to point it to very much, if you look at it, which you should not do, you'll see that I have a lot of white LEDs in there. The white is the blue and the white light, as well as I have a lot of additional red. I use the higher end red spectrum, as well as I started using a lot of the 730 nanometer as well, the far red, or infrared if you want to say, because we found out that that also promotes faster blooming. So your plants will actually bloom faster having the far red than they will if they didn't have the far red. So that's kind of the gist of the LEDs that I make and why I make them. And then, you know, people always ask me, well, if I have the LEDs, how many hours a day should I run the LEDs? Well, that's seasonal. I think the best is a minimum of 12 hours a day, and we usually do that December and maybe January. And then in January, February, and March, start increasing it by an hour per day, per month, until you get up to either 14 or 16. I think 16 is better. A lot of people only want to run their LEDs 14 hours a day. That's fine, you can run them 14, but I think you're going to get better results if you run them up to 16 hours per day. And a lot of people think that you need a lot brighter light than what you really need with the LEDs. They read different things on websites that say, oh, you have to have 3,500 foot candles for cattleyas, or you have to have, you know, 1,500 foot candles for phalaenopsis. Well, that is true, but those numbers really were derived from when they were measuring it, and a lot of it came from noon or afternoon studies. That's what the sun would put out, or maybe you would get in a greenhouse at noon. But remember, when you have this LED and you turn it on in the morning, and it comes on at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and it runs for 16 hours, it's delivering the same amount of energy over that 12 to 16 hour day. It doesn't peak at noon and then start coming down. It doesn't take all morning to get up to its peak at noon and then start coming down again. This is a consistent amount of energy. So when you're delivering a consistent amount of energy, you don't have to have the peak that you have, that, you know, some of these other sites suggest. It's absolutely not necessary. I have people that will take this LED right here, and they'll put phalaenopsis under my LED. And for phalaenopsis, I always recommend 13, 14 inches from the top of the canopy, which would be the top of the leaves. So if we had this, we'd go from the top of the leaves, 13 inches up to my light. Okay, can you guys see that? So we'd go 13 inches from the top of these leaves here, from the top of these leaves to the bottom of the light. We want about 13 inches. The same light you can take and bloom cattleyas under. Now, if we have a cattleya, which we have some around here, but I'm not going to grab one, we would only want to be about 7 inches. So by dropping it, that 6 to 7 inches, we've doubled, more than doubled the intensity of this LED. This LED will now start blooming cattleyas, whereas before, you're blooming phalaenopsis at a higher distance. So just that little bit of distance, that 6, 7 inches, will make all the world of difference in you blooming a cattleya versus a phalaenopsis. Starting this next year, I started making a little bit more powerful light. I've taken the same LED design, the same LED structure, and I've doubled it. So now, instead of with my traditional one row, you can see there's one row of chips in there. Instead of one row of chips, now I have 2 rows of chips. I'm only going to make them in the 48 inch. I'm not going to make them in the smaller ones because people are going to bloom larger plants, cattleyas, dendrobiums, catasetums, that type of thing under these. So this is now going to have 38 watts of power, actual draw power, 38 watts. And if you put 2 of these above your cattleyas, you'll have awesome blooms with this, okay? You still have to take care of your plant, but you take care of your plant, you'll have awesome blooms because this is double the power. And everybody for the past multiple years has been blooming them off of my single ones, but having to put them closer. So now we can take them a little bit further up, still deliver tremendous power to that plant. And that means you're going to get a little bit more coverage. It'll cover a little bit more, a little bit deeper on the shelf, a little bit more depth on the shelf. So that's what we've been working on. In addition to that, you know, this isn't, I think a lot of people have the misconception that I go out and I just buy these from wherever I can find them and then turn around, bring them in and sell them. I actually don't. I design the whole thing. I define the parts and then have them made with a partner factory that does it for me. But everything from the color of the cord, the connection of the cord, if you notice it has an O-ring here, that O-ring, when you connect them and you screw them down, it actually provides an IP65. IP65 is a rating for waterproof. These are actually waterproof LEDs. So everything that's on here is on here for a reason. The driver that's inside, the chips that are used, the actual chips, I determine which chips I want to use, the manufacturer, the whole thing. So it's not that I just go out and I pick a LED and say, okay, well, this would be a good LED and we use it. No, I actually go out and design everything. And the research that I do, a lot of it has to do, it starts here with, I have a little spectrometer. I use the spectrometer, I can set it up in the greenhouse, measure the light, which Norman's been nice enough to let me measure a lot of his different greenhouses. And I get the data from there. So I figure out ask him, hey Norman, what's your best blooming greenhouse? He says, oh, I use this one for blooming. Okay, so I go and I measure that light. I measure how many hours a day light hits that greenhouse, how much light actually gets into that greenhouse, what the spectrum is that comes into that greenhouse, all kinds of different things. And then I go back and I determine, okay, what do I need to replicate in a light that's similar to his greenhouse so that we can get the same results that Norman gets blooming at home, right? Because that's what we want. Trade secret? Well, I'm not supposed to say trade secret. Yeah. No, you can duplicate in your house what he's doing in his best blooming greenhouses. So that's what we've done. So then I take that back to my manufacturer and say, okay, this is the spec, this is the range, this is what I have to do, this is what I want. This is another tool that I use. It's made by Apogee Instruments. And this doesn't do just spectrum. This is where I get my DLI, daylight integer from. This measures photon flux, all kinds of different things that I can get from it. But this is another one that I get that I place in the different greenhouses. It allows me to gather the data. And this one I think we just had running for like over a month, up until a couple of weeks ago. So I have a lot of data that I need to go through on that one to capture and try and make heads and tails out of. Because every time I manufacture these lights, I'm always looking for what I can improve. So I take the data that I gather from Norman's greenhouses, capture it through the different various tools that I have, and then go back to my manufacturer and say, okay, we need to change this. I want to increase this. I want to decrease that. And that's what we do. And then that's how we come up with the product that you guys have now. And that's what you guys have been using for the past couple of years. And if you notice, if you look through the forums and look, everybody will say Jeff Young lights. Well, that's what Jeff Young lights are right here. You can get them at the orchidhobbyist.com. Again, that's the orchidhobbyist.com. And what it is just data that we've been able to take from greenhouses, assemble it through the tools, the various different tools that I have to be able to capture it, and then figure out what we need as hobbyists, because I'm growing just like you guys are, what we need, what's going to give us the edge as far as blooming our plants. And is it just for orchids? No, it's not just for orchids. It'll work for anything. I have people that grow vegetables under it. I have people that grow African violets are getting to be real popular. A lot of the African violet, nodding his head yes. A lot of the African violet people are growing under my LEDs. I've had people in Canada, because you know that they have shorter days too. They're growing vegetables, tomatoes, bell peppers, cucumbers, habaneros, all kinds of stuff under them. So anything that takes full spectrum will do well under these lights because it is full spectrum. But the plus comes in, like I say, is because I add the additional red, and I go even further by adding the far red to it, the 730 nanometer spectrum. And that's really what's responsible for earlier blooming and also higher flower count. So, you know, next time, you know, you look out and you see your plants sitting there and you think, I think they need a little bit more light. Consider my lights. They're proven, they work. There's a lot of time that I've spent researching these. I still spend a lot of time, And there's a lot of development that's gone into getting these lights. So when you look at it and you say, okay, well, isn't this just the same as if I go to Walmart or I go to Home Depot and buy a light? Absolutely not. No way. No way. Those lights, like I say, remember, those lights are geared for what you see, what your eyes see. What the plant sees or what the plant wants is completely different than what your eyes see. They like the blue, they like the red. Now in the middle is the green, which is what we see. The green is great for penetration, deep leaf penetration or deep canopy penetration. That's where the green is really going to come in. But as far as the blue and the red, it's important to have that good mix of blue and red if you want good root growth and you want a lot of flowers and good flower production. That's where you want the red. So big difference between what I have and what you're going to get from Home Depot or anywhere else. Like they say right on the box, those are shop lights, not orchid lights, not plant lights.
Use less electricity too, because
well, if you're comparing this to like a fluorescent bulb or T5HO, those things, most of those bulbs are going to run 45 watts. Okay, each one's going to draw 45 watts. These, even on my, well, the small ones like these, I think are 9-10 watts. Okay, so and that's what I was saying earlier before you came. You can hook 10 of these up, and that would be just like a regular light bulb in your house, regular incandescent light bulb. 10 of these. So you can get your metal rack, connect 10 of them together. I showed everybody how we connect them, how we power them. Connect 10 of them together, and it would be the same as if you're running just one light bulb, just one. And you can run that the entire day. It's not going to take that much energy consumption.
And not much heat come out of it.
No, there's no heat. I can leave this on, plug it in, run it the entire day. I can run it 16 hours. In fact, I can run this for 16 hours and touch this, and it's never going to be warm. I know you guys have all seen the pictures where Jamie has these hanging in her book stand, right? She has her book stand. She has these above the book stand. Some of hers are actually touching the lights. They're close enough they're actually touching. They don't burn up. I don't recommend that. I mean, let's not all go out and start doing that. There's no reason for it. But let's say that you have a spike that's coming up and it starts touching the LEDs. It's not going to burn it. It's not going to burn it at all. This has been on now for a minute. If this was a regular light bulb, I'd be going in the emergency room with 3rd-degree burns. Okay, I would have burned my hand already by now. I can sit here and hold this, and it's not even warm to the touch field.
Yeah, completely cool.
Yeah. This is not going to burn your leaves. You're not going to have any damage from heat. And, like I said, it's completely IP65 waterproof, all the way down to the connections. The connections have this little O-ring on it. And with that O-ring, once you put the cap on and you screw them together, you're IP65 waterproof for the entire thing. You can put it, don't do it. You can put it and run it underwater. It can be done. And just the O-ring is gonna keep it. So you're not gonna get that from Home Depot. You're not gonna get that from, Walmart or even the Amazon stuff. They're all just mass produced. They're brought in, they're not produced for plants. You're not gonna have that. So when you need a light, think about, the Orchid Hobbyist. He has lights that are meant to grow orchids. And that's why they're meant to grow orchids. Like I said, I'm growing them at home just like you are. There's no difference between me and you. And this is what I use, and they work.
And how long with the, what is the lifespan?
The lifespan, the chips will last 50,000 hours. Okay. Because we have chips that are in here. So on a 48-inch, I have 120 chips. This one is my double one. You can see there's 2 rows of chips. This one has 240 chips. The chips themselves will last 50,000 hours. But that's probably not what's going to burn out first. What's going to burn out first is you're going to get a bad connection somewhere, something's going to get twisted, something's going to get bent, something's going to happen somewhere, or there's also a driver in there. The driver may fail. Theoretically, everything should last for 50,000 hours. I warranty it 1 year unconditional. You have a problem, send it back. I'll ship you a new one because I know that they're not going to go bad. But theoretically, I think, you should expect 3 to 5 years without having to replace it. And when you're doing bulbs, you're replacing them every 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing every 6 months. So these are a little bit more expensive up front than buying a bulb, but you're not going to have to replace them every 6 months. You're not going to go through the hassle. So the other question I get a lot is, how do I hang them? They come with these little hangers. Sometimes they're metal, sometimes they're plastic, just whatever I happen to have at the time. They snap on. It has a screw hole at the end. If you're mounting it under a shelf, all you have to do is snap it on and run a screw after it's on there. That makes it really convenient. For me, this is too much hassle. I don't even use this because I'm using the wire rack. I just like to use zip ties. I take a zip tie, run it around the wire rack, the slats that are going through the rack.
I think that thing is very,
and I just slide it through 2 zip ties because, again, it's not getting hot. This has been running now for 5 minutes or something like that. It's still cool to the touch. I can sit here and hold it. It's not going to melt any zip tie that goes around it. Brian, you use zip ties on yours, right?
Yeah, I zip tied it.
Yeah, it's just convenient because the only drawback to this is sometimes when you're working around it, you hit it and then the light will pop out.
Oh, right.
And I don't want to mess with the lights popping out. See, I mean, it just kind of snaps on and it snaps off just like that. I prefer not to use them, like I said. But if you're going to mount it somewhere and you're going to leave it there, it works just fine. I'm always doing something. So for me, I just run it through 2 zip ties hanging, run it through that way, and then you're done. And the other thing that you need to do, this, I call it an end cap, because remember, each LED has 2 wires. One wire where the power comes in, which has this screw cap on it with the O-ring so it can be IP65 waterproof. And then the other end where the power would go out to the next LED. But eventually you get to the end of the chain, right? Eventually you reach the end and you say, hey, I don't have any more LED, but I still have this terminal. That's a live terminal. Still has 110 volts running through it. So we take this cap and just push it on over the end of it. Actually, I think it's made to go on the, it should go on this end. Just take it, it stretches out, and just force it over the end of it. And then once you get it on the end of it, you know, you can screw it a little bit there, whatever. Now, there's nothing exposed. And again, it's all about being waterproof because you want it waterproof. You don't want live power running and you're watering your flowers, water's running down, you got power and water. No, that doesn't work. So when you get to your very last one, you only need 1 per setup. You put on the terminal or the end cap and you're done. What do you think? You have any questions?
I've been wanting to order.
You've been wanting to order. Yeah. Why? Because the days are getting shorter, right?
Yes.
You're beginning to wonder, hey, what am I gonna do this winter with my plants because they need light?
And
Well,
it's starting to get cool. So.
Yeah, again, and look, this has been on for what, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
How much heat is it? How much heat is it per?
Supplement your greenhouse too.
Yeah. Yes, that's another idea.
Not even warm, is it?
Yeah. No, and I think that's a great idea because it's so waterproof. You can put it in the greenhouse.
Well, waterproof. Yeah, there's a lot of people that supplement. Linda supplements, I think, her greenhouse with them, and a lot of other folks. You know, waterproof is just really important because we're watering our orchids every week, sometimes every 2 or 3 days in the summer, and then, you know, in the wintertime, maybe only twice a month. But no matter what, there's always water. So you got to think, you know, water, and you don't want water and power just don't mix.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
So I don't know of stuff that you're buying from Home Depot, Walmart, Amazon. What else on there says waterproof?
Yes.
How many things say waterproof? They're not. Waterproof is an issue.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that what you're buying is waterproof for your own safety.
Yeah.
I think that's about it. Do we have any questions, Brian?
And you have every size in stock now.
Well, next week.
Good.
Yes, they're in LA. They're just waiting to clear customs.
Great.
One person asked, do they not need reflectors to spread out the light?
Okay, good question. A lot of people think these are bulbs. They're not. They're complete units. Everything is contained. That's why it has the wires on it, not just pins that plug into a hood. This is one complete unit. You plug it in and you use it, and that's it. If you look at it, you'll notice that the bottom part of the lens is clear and the top part has this white coating on the inside. That is the reflector. So what that's going to do is that's going to keep all light pointing directly down. You see that there's chips. The chips are going to be, when you hang it at 90 degrees, they're going to come straight down. They're not pointed towards you, they're not pointed towards me, they're pointed straight down. So this coating across the top is going to keep any light that would normally come out from the side a little bit or come back up towards the top, it's going to direct it straight down. So the lens itself is a specific lens that disperses the light at 120 degree beam angle coming out. So you have these chips that face straight down, and the lens disperses it at 120 degrees coming out of here. That's why, again, we go back and I recommend 2 per 14 to 18 inch depth shelf. And then you don't put 2 of them together like this right in the middle. You spread them out. So you have one 3 to 4 inches from the back and one 3 to 4 inches from the front. And look, when you do that, they happen to connect perfectly together. So that's the amount of wire on here is by design, because you can put the 2 of those together and have them spread across the shelf that we use, and it'll be the perfect distance to even out the light on that shelf. It'll be properly spread for you, so then you don't have to worry about it.
Someone was asking, just to double check, would these be waterproof, or like if they want to use it in a greenhouse?
Definitely waterproof if you want to use it in a greenhouse. They are IP65. What I would suggest is that you Google IP65 and look at the rating on that. That'll explain to you. It's going to go into some big definition as to how many feet underwater it can go, the whole thing, whatever. I don't think about going underwater. I just think about it being splash proof and you not getting shocked. That's what's important to me. And the last thing that I always suggest to people, and I think people don't even think about, is when you're doing the rack and you connect them all in parallel, we call it daisy chain. When you daisy chain all of them, you just end up with one cord, which means you're going to have one plug. So now what you need to do with that one plug is connect it to a timer.
Yeah.
Okay? And what I suggest people do is they get a smart plug, because a smart plug has a built-in timer to it. So a smart plug is just going to be a little plug that's going to connect into your socket. And if you have the double socket, it's just going to take up half of that. So one, it's not going to cover the whole plate. It's just going to cover one. And it doesn't really even look like much. I don't have one here, but it would just be a little box. And a smart plug, you're going to put that into your regular 110 outlet. And then you're going to hook it up to your Wi-Fi. It's going to connect to your Wi-Fi, and then you're going to take out your cell phone, and now you can program it for how many hours you want it to come on, what time you want it to come on, and what time you want it to go off, and for how many days. So because we're doing this, we want it 7 days, so we want 7 days a week. And now we're going into winter, so we're going to drop it down to probably 12 to 13 hours. So we're going to have 12 to 13 hours that it's going to run. And we're going to do all this on the smartphone. And then each month, we're going to increase it starting in February or March by an hour a day to get up to our 14 or 16, whatever you prefer. So each month, you just go and add an extra hour on it. You're not messing with the little dip switches. Everybody thinks, oh God, I got to configure another one of those timers. No. Forget those timers with the dip switches. Get a smart plug. The smart plug is going to be your friend on this. It's going to be so much easier. And they're only probably like $9 or $10 for one of them off Amazon. That's going to be your friend in this, because it's going to get you through this faster and easier, and it's going to make it more flexible for you to keep adding an hour a day come the springtime months, so you can get up to your maximum of 14 or 16 hours a day.
Someone asked if they should buy the newer design or the older design.
I only offer the newer design at any time. This one, which I said was newer design, this is the double row, so it's more power. This one is what I recommend for Cattleyas, Vandas, Catasetums, Dendrobiums, and it's actually going to be available for 2021. I think I have some coming in next week, and then the bulk of my order will be available, will be coming in sometime in November. So I really said the release date is 2021 on it, but I'll probably start shipping them by the end of November. So that, you don't want to take this and use it for Phalaenopsis. It's just too much power. It's a waste of money. It's not going to hurt your Phalaenopsis any. You're going to give them too much light. But what you would do is just raise it higher. But why do you want to spend more money and then raise it a further distance? You can do it with just my regular LEDs for a little bit less money and not have to worry about it. But this, the newer one that I've come out with, is specifically for your higher light requirement orchids.
Someone asked if they can be hung vertically.
Vertically?
I don't
Sure,
know.
you can hang them any way you want. There are people that are doing these cabinets now. They're taking old curio cabinets, old china cabinets. There's a whole group, I think Crystal's involved in it. She said she's building a group, and they're going to use IKEA cabinets. They're going to IKEA and buying cabinets. And in some of those instances, they want to have, the light is greater depth than what one of these would normally reach being hung this way. So in some cases, they're going to mount them vertically in these cabinets, either from the front or the back. I'm not sure how they're doing it yet. Or sometimes they do it from the side. But yeah, you can mount these however you like. There's no specific orientation to them whatsoever.
Someone asked, do we need to wear protective eyeglasses around them?
Well, I mean, I can't sit here and say no. Yeah, you should wear sunglasses around them all the time to protect your eyes. First of all, you should never look directly into the LED itself. You can damage your eyes. But it's like any light. You know, if you're going to be working around lights, it's always a good idea to wear a safety glass. If you're going to be working around bright lights like this, it's probably a good idea to wear sunglasses. But because these are hung and the light is coming straight down and it's not pointed towards you or towards me, I don't wear any glasses while working around them. I work around them all the time. But you do want to make sure that the light is pointing directly down. And you should never try to stare into the LEDs to see if all the chips are working, or they're going to work, but you should never stare at it.
Someone asked, how many do you recommend for a 24-inch shelf?
24 inches would be the depth. If it's 24 inches deep, instead of 2, I would go to 3. Because on a normal, like I said, 14 to 18 inch, and 18 is getting kind of on the edge of pushing it, just because of the 120-degree angle coming out and the height that you're going to have the lights above it. You're going to want a little bit more coverage than what these are going to do when you get into 24-inch depth shelf. So then I would go to 3 over 2.
That's all the questions.
All right, then I'm going to get out of here so Norman can get started. And I want to thank Jamie and Norman for allowing me to come in and talk to you guys about lights today. You can tell I'm a little bit passionate about it. I spend all my time researching, developing, and working on improving my lights, because it's not just a product to buy and sell, it's really a passion for me. I enjoy